Hi guys, in today's video I build a custom set of cornhole boards for one of my customers. I plan to release a separate video that will give you an idea of how the business is going and how YouTube's going and give you some more behind the scenes. I'm going to show you how I built the cornhole as well as how I applied the custom painted design, which I think is the selling feature. Some lessons were learned in this build. Not everything went according to plan, and I'll show you how we overcame some of those challenges and how with a few little design changes we were still able to give my customer a final product that she was thrilled with. I was really happy with how these turned out, and I hope you enjoy the video. Very cold in the shop this morning in southern Ontario. It's late January. Yes, I know I still need to get my camera in landscape mode. A couple little mistakes still early on in my channel. Just breaking down the plywood here to final size with my track saw. A quick measurement here. There was a little bit of a hiccup, so I do have a couple sheets left over that are going to be tough to use for more cornhole boards, but I have an idea how I can use them, but I was able to get enough out of what I bought. Just building the frame out of some 2x4 material, just cutting it to size so that the planer has a little less work to do. A little bit of a shorter length, I find it can get a little flatter and straighter and smoother. Stacking up all my materials. I'm actually making 2 cornhole boards in this video. I'm going to really just show you the one, but there are 2 going on at the same time. So there's all my lumber milled down nice and square and flat. This was a new thing I did with this build, and I found it paid off a lot, having nice flat and smooth lumber to work with right from the get-go. Everything's going to be held together with pocket screws, so I took some time before everything got put together, and I just made sure everything was pre-drilled. The thing with pocket screws is once you screw them in, they have a tendency to shift, so it's really important to get a good clamp on your edges. And you can see that clamping, I was able to get that nice and flush, and any little inconsistencies you just sand after the fact. So doing the same to the other side, I had to do this 4 times. I'm making 2 sets. You can see that there's also some pocket holes on the edges. I'm going to use that to adhere the top 1/2-inch sheet of plywood to the frame. I'm also going to use some Type Bond 3 glue just to give it a little extra holding power. So really the pocket screws are basically just going to be acting as clamps. Now, just to make sure nothing shifts, I like to put a couple clamps on there before I start screwing everything together. Make sure everything's nice and flush. It took a lot of tinkering to make sure that these pocket screws didn't blow through the top of the 1/2-inch plywood, so I had to make a test piece and do a couple trial and errors. So this is the jig that I made up to cut the holes. I've seen people on YouTube, they'll use a hole saw. I find this a little safer. The hole saw tends to, especially this size, can catch the wood and really twist your wrist. I also find this gives you a nicer finish. So I made up this jig. It makes quick work of these. Some little spacers on the side to make sure you're always centered. So I don't have to get my tape measure to lay out the hole either, which is nice. Giving everything I believe it was a 1/4-inch round over. I find this gives it a nice look, and it's really soft to the touch when you pick it up. Everything's going to get a polyurethane finish, so I didn't go too crazy with the sanding. I believe I went 120 and then a quick 220 just to soften it up at the end. Just laying out the hole for the legs now, using my marking gauge, just trying to get it nice and centered. I needed to do this 8 times, I believe, so I did make a fixture here on my drill press just to make sure that I could just bring in a new leg and quickly drill the new hole without having to lay it out every time. Now, I'm using a pretty big Forstner bit here. I was thinking I'd do a countersink on the leg. Afterwards, I kind of decided against that, but I was still able to utilize this leg, but trying to get that round cut out with my bandsaw was not working, so I switched to the jigsaw. Definitely going to need to sell that bandsaw. It only works for 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch material, only softwoods. So yeah, this is the size I went with. Building a jig now so that I can drill the same hole to accept the legs on the frames. Now this jig, I'm having a little bit of an overlap on either side, so I can use it as a left and a right jig. Just holding it together with some brad nails. You can see I just clamp it there, I locate to the edges, and then I can put my Forstner bit in and drill my countersink. And then that countersink is actually going to give me positioning to drill the actual through hole. So you can see how it looks. So that bolt head is inset. Now the first one, this is actually a little bit of a rewind. This is the first hole I drilled, and I used this to make my template. Tried to clamp a piece of wood to reduce the blowout, but I did not clamp it hard enough. Luckily that'll sand out, and I'll just put some stain on that and you'll never see it. So you can see my leg isn't fully cut yet, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it up on a can of paint. Now this is something I learned from John Malecki's channel. You just you put your cornhole board on a can of paint, you get a perfect 12 inches. And then you can mark your edge and just use that as a guide, rather than trying to work out the perfect angle and doing a bunch of trigonometry. Just mark your edge, and then from there I can make myself a template, and that's what I'll use then to make the rest of the legs. So I'll just use that and mark out all my legs on my next 2x4. Roughly cut it out with a jigsaw. I'll show you how I'm going to clean this up after, so you can see after this piece falls off. It's a really rough cut, but I have a way that I can clean that up, and I'll show you that in a minute. So after I get all my rounds, I'll take my template, and again I'll use that to line up my blade, so I don't need to know the exact angle. As long as the blade matches the template, we're good to go. So now I cut all these to size. Once I clamp the template to my piece, I can use that round on the template to create a nice smooth finish with a template bit. Now it's by no means perfect, but that is all going to get hidden under the cornhole. It's purely functional. Now I'm going to show you my really sketchy router table that I made myself. I would only trust it for tiny roundovers. I would never do anything crazy with this, just disclaimer, but it works a lot better than using this big 1.5 horsepower router on these tiny pieces. So now I'm just able to run all the edges and put a nice little soft 1/8 inch roundover. Definitely adds a little something to those legs. Now I'm ready to start applying the stain. And my customer wanted a dark stain on the cornhole, and you'll notice right about here is where I made a big mistake. That is way too much stain for this soft pine. It absorbed in almost immediately, and it left some really nasty streaks all over. So I was kind of in panic mode right around here, trying to figure out how to get those streaks out. So I tried sanding them. I thought maybe I could just sand all the board down, but no matter how hard I tried, the stain just would not come off. Here's the other board, and you can see the grain just looks so much different, so much more different than the other board. So they really weren't matching up the way I had hoped. So I should clarify at this stage that my customer has not given me a very specific design, and she's given me a lot of design freedom. And she specifically wanted this sort of a wooden cookie sort of design with some trees in it, and she wanted her family name, and she wanted a dark stain. That was all the instruction that I got. So I feel like I had a little bit of leeway here, and I could make some modifications. And I was really happy with the way it turned out. You'll see that here in a bit. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and accentuate how these two boards are different, rather than try and make them look exactly the same, which was my current plan. And I'm going to do that by kind of doing a mirror image of the two. So it'll be kind of like a left-hand board and a right-hand board. I'll let you guys be the judge of how it turned out, but I was really happy with it. Well, my wife helped out a lot with this stage. You might notice those are not my hands. We started putting some stencils on the finished product. You can see first we're going to make a little border. You notice they're a little different. That's kind of what I mentioned earlier. We're going to try and accentuate the differences between the boards. I made this little round cutout on our Cricut, so that's going to highlight the hole cutout for the cornhole board. Very tricky to get these stencils to stick. They really didn't want to stick to the stain. We ended up putting on a bunch of Mod Podge all over the cornhole boards, and that helped a lot getting those stencils to stick. You notice that all these tiny little details on the stencils, they really were having trouble sticking, and it was a very tedious task to get that transfer paper to come off. There's my wife again painting the cornhole. So we're gonna go with a black, and it's just gonna cover the whole thing with some outdoor paint that we happen to have. So in this one we're actually gonna paint all the details. The other one we painted the entire board. So we're gonna have a black perimeter on this one, and that cookie design that was picked out by my customer is gonna get painted black. Nice, satisfying. Peeling off all the tape and the vinyl. Now this stencil was tough to get it all off. It was very tedious. It's kind of a love-hate relationship we have with the Cricut, where it's very satisfying to get the stencil off, but it can drive you a little crazy at the same time. So here's the other board. So this one, the stencil is actually going to be covering up the board, so that way we're left with the wood design showing that cookie and trees. And there's the two boards. We still have to put, there's Randy. We still need to put on the family name, so there's the stencil for that. We're going to paint that white so it pops. I'm using a sponge here, just dabbing. Still kind of just a theory of ours that the sponge kind of helps helps the paint from seeping through the vinyl. So again, this one was very tricky to get all those tiny little pieces off without damaging the paint. We were unsuccessful. There were a few spots where we needed to go back and touch up with a smaller brush. After we were done doing this, though, you barely noticed them. So you may not recognize these boards. These are the other boards that I'm making in parallel. So I'm just applying a clear coat spray just to protect all that paint. I'm gonna go back and put on some outdoor polyurethane afterwards, but just giving a little extra protection here. Very smelly paint, so I was using a respirator here, but even then you can still kind of smell it. So my whole shop was kind of a quarantine zone after this for a couple hours to let everything disperse. There I am putting on the polyurethane. So I like to just put on a very liberal coat of it, and then after I'm done I go back and just do nice straight brush strokes to kind of smooth out all the bubbles and all the streaks to try and make it look uniform. Now there's what it looks like after the polyurethane is on. It gives it a nice sheen that I really liked. And there's the boards, all done. So I was really happy with how these turned out. I think the mirror image of the two boards was a great choice, and my customer really liked it. And here's the Buffalo Bills boards that I made for a separate customer. I was also very happy with how these turned out. Thanks for watching the video. For everyone who's subscribing and everyone who's not subscribed, thank you so much. My wife and I have been blown away by the support and the positive comments and the amount of subscribers in such a short period of time. We really appreciate you, and we're going to keep putting out content, and my next video will outline the business side of things for these couple projects that I built, and we'll talk about how I want to improve that and some different things I want to change. Lastly, I'll show you the YouTube progress for my analytics, what I've learned so far, and what I plan to implement in the next couple videos. Thanks again. See you next time.